I'm Blair Best. It's Tuesday here on The Story, and tonight we're going back to Southern California. An Oregon firefighter who was just there fighting the flames joins us live in just a few minutes. Plus, President Trump's attempt at a spending freeze is temporarily blocked by a federal judge, sparking widespread confusion. How that's impacting the Northwest. But first, I went to an immigrant community in Northwest Portland where I met a woman who traveled here from Mexico for work opportunities, as she and her family are responding to President Trump's threat of mass deportations. It's our big story tonight. During President Trump's first week in office, he signed 10 executive orders on immigration and made new rules so it's easier to remove people from the country. That includes ending a policy to avoid arresting immigrants at schools, hospitals, and churches. Now, this is all in an attempt to keep his long-promised mass deportations aimed at cracking down on immigration. Trump has expanded arrests to anyone who crosses the border illegally, not just people with criminal convictions, national security threats, or those stopped at the border. As of Tuesday afternoon, NBC News is reporting ICE has arrested at least 4,829 people in the crackdowns since Inauguration Day. Now, to give some perspective, in September of 2024, the latest data available, the Biden administration arrested an average of 282 people per day. Over the last 6 days, the Trump administration's daily average is 753. Now, all of this is sparking fear among immigrant communities across the country, including right here in Oregon. Calls have been pouring into our newsroom with people concerned to send their children to school or mistakenly believing that they see ICE on public transit. But Oregon is a sanctuary state. In fact, the first state in the country to pass a statewide law stopping local police and government from helping federal authorities with immigration enforcement, though Trump has threatened to punish sanctuary jurisdictions that don't cooperate with federal immigration authorities. And we are seeing local schools react to these changes. Administrators at Reynolds High School, where nearly half of the student body is Spanish-speaking, just made a podcast episode focusing on immigrant rights to ease the nerves some families are feeling. And the Beaverton School Board just passed a resolution affirming support of all students and families, regardless of national origin, citizenship, or immigration documentation status. So I wanted to hear from someone in our local immigrant community, hear their story and how President Trump's new rules are impacting them. So this morning, I went to an area in Northeast Portland where many immigrants live. That's where I met Abigail. She tells me she's from a small town in Mexico and immigrated to Northeast Portland 26 years ago so her family could have better opportunities. She tells me she works as a janitor and has 3 kids.
Here is the opportunities for my kids. This is good for my kids. So, lo que yo puedo decir es que nosotros solo venimos a trabajar en un país y queremos seguir trabajando con confianza, no con miedo.
Now, Abigail tells me she and her family have all the documentation required to live in this country. But that's not the case for some of her friends, and the increased deportations are rattling her community, one that she says is here to work and not cause harm.
Y yo sé que hay mucha gente que tiene miedo, entonces quisiéramos hacer un llamado al presidente Trump que no funda ese pánico a nuestra gente inmigrante, que esta gente solo viene a trabajar, no venimos a hacer daño, sino que venimos a trabajar. Y pagamos impuestos, hacemos todo lo que las leyes requieren. Entonces yo no creo que estemos haciendo daño a nadie, solo queremos que este país sea próspero.
Now, she tells me the uncertainty of all this is affecting the young kids in her community. They're afraid to go to school or church and afraid their parents won't come home from work.
Los niños que están en la escuela, cuando dicen que quieren entrar en la escuela, que quieren entrar en iglesias, hay inseguridad. Prácticamente hay inseguridad en este tiempo. Maybe tomorrow you want to know today somebody's go to work. Maybe I don't come back when I have little kids. This is problem.
Now, just in about 2 hours ago, Portland Police Chief Bob Day released a video message addressing immigration enforcement. He says the Bureau is closely monitoring reports of immigration enforcement efforts beginning across the country, and he wants everyone to feel safe and protected. He says the Bureau does not engage in immigration enforcement. We're going to play some of his message for you here. Listen.
I take great pride in PPB's community engagement and continuous efforts over the years. We have long-standing relationships within the immigrant communities and Portland-based organizations that advocate and serve these families. In addition, members of the Police Bureau are continuing outreach efforts to build relationships, especially in communities that may be distrustful of police.
Today, the Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, it's a Portland-based social services group that's been helping refugees and immigrants for nearly 50 years. They sent us the following statement saying in part, quote, "As we step into 2025, our mission remains unwavering. Rooted in Portland, a sanctuary city and a sanctuary state, we are committed to building a community of safety, opportunity, and belonging."
This next order relates to the definition of birthright citizenship under the 14th Amendment of the United States.
Now, as promised during his campaign last year, on his first day as president, Trump signed an executive order to end birthright citizenship. However, some are confused as to who is impacted by this and whether that could include some of Trump's top allies. Casey Decker with our Verify team looks at the full scope of this executive order.
The 14th Amendment of the Constitution says that everyone born in the U.S. is automatically an American citizen, regardless of their parents' legal status. President Trump is trying to unilaterally end that practice with an executive order issued on his first day in office. Within days, 22 different states sued to block the executive order, and a judge has already put it on hold while it's debated in court. Some critics of the order claim that it won't just impact the immigrants Trump is targeting, but also members of the president's own inner circle. They say that his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the Second Lady, Usha Vance, would lose their citizenship because neither of their parents were citizens when they were born. Verify viewers wanted to know if the executive order could retroactively revoke citizenship. So let's verify. Our sources: the text of the order, the 14th Amendment, and the text of the court ruling. The executive order says, quote, "No department or agency of the United States government shall issue documents recognizing United States citizenship to anyone born in the U.S. if neither parent is a lawful permanent resident." But it also says that the rule, quote, "shall apply only to persons who are born within the United States after 30 days from the date of this order." The order was issued January 20th, so would only affect children born after February 19th, if it's upheld by the courts. So we can verify, no, Trump's birthright citizenship order would not retroactively revoke citizenship. Just 3 days after the order was issued, a federal judge issued a 14-day hold, calling Trump's action, quote, "blatantly unconstitutional." With your Verify, I'm Casey Decker.
Now, as mentioned, Trump's birthright citizenship executive order quickly sparked a legal battle between the Trump administration and several states, including Oregon and Washington. Washington State Attorney General Nick Brown filed a lawsuit to block the executive order from taking effect. He was joined shortly by the attorneys general from Arizona, Illinois, and Oregon. This week, our team talked with the newly elected Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield about the lawsuit.
Birthright citizenship is something that has been in our Constitution since the 14th Amendment, so we're talking more than 100 years. It has been interpreted by every presidential administration for more than 100 years. And so we challenged the constitutionality of the President Trump's executive order. Effectively, the president, with the stroke of the pen, had tried to rewrite more than 100 years of the interpretation of the United States Constitution.
Last week, Rayfield and the states suing to block Trump's executive order were handed a temporary victory after a federal judge issued a national temporary restraining order.
A judge that had been appointed by President Reagan ruled in favor, saying that the president cannot overturn more than 100 years of precedence and interpretation of the U.S. Constitution. And that is incredibly important because you never want any president, Democratic or Republican, to be able to have the ability to overturn the Constitution with merely the stroke of a pen. When you start allowing that, and that's why this ruling was so important, when you start allowing that, or if we allowed a president to overturn the Constitution, then that starts to trickle into other critically important amendments that we also have, right? You think about freedom of speech and other amendments along those lines.
That restraining order will only take effect for 2 weeks, and the two sides will continue to deliberate in early February. Now, after the ruling, the Justice Department released a statement saying it will, quote, vigorously defend the executive order. But in the meantime, Rayfield says Oregonians won't feel any impact from Trump's birthright citizenship order.
So right now, things are as they had been prior to the executive order. We'll have another hearing on February 6th. There's also an East Coast case that's moving forward. My hope and anticipation is that the federal court will continue to see that this executive order is unconstitutional, and then things will remain as they have been for more than 100 years. And so that's the path that we are on currently. Again, as with anything in human behavior, until you have that final ruling from a judge, I think it is best to be a little bit measured in predicting what a court may or may not do.
Well, turning now to another controversial move by the Trump administration that was again blocked by a federal judge just hours ago. The order would have pushed federal grants so that agencies can review whether the funding matches his policy goals on issues such as ending DEI and removing protections for transgender people. Although it's been temporarily blocked for now, though the freeze could have widespread implications affecting everything from education to nonprofits. Here's investigative reporter Kyle Eboshi.
In the kitchen at Meals on Wheels People in Southwest Portland, a steady stream of containers are prepared for delivery, one after another. This nonprofit fed nearly 11,000 people last year. But President Trump's order to pause all federal grants has created some uncertainty. About 35% of Meals on Wheels funding come from federal dollars.
If it goes away, that is a huge hit for the amount of people we can feed.
My administration.
The abrupt halt on federal grants and loans announced Monday night by the Trump administration has created widespread confusion across the government in state and local programs.
I think it's too early to tell, but it would be a huge hit. So we will have to figure out how to raise revenue.
Portland area nonprofits, big and small, such as Mercy Corps and Portland Youth Builders, rely on federal grants along with other sources. It's not clear how their finances could be affected. Administration officials said the freeze was necessary to ensure that all funding complies with President Trump's executive orders.
So what does this pause mean? It means no more funding for illegal DEI programs. It means no more funding for the Green New scam that has cost American taxpayers tens of billions of dollars. It means no more funding for transgenderism and wokeness across our federal bureaucracy and agencies. No more funding for Green New Deal social engineering policies.
On Tuesday, a federal judge temporarily blocked the order just minutes before it was set to go into effect. Democrats claim the order is unconstitutional because Congress already authorized the money.
The president is not a king.
Oregon Attorney General Dan Rayfield said he'll join other state attorneys general in suing to stop the White House from pausing federal grants.
And when you exceed your powers, it is part of our responsibility on behalf of all Oregonians to hold the Trump administration accountable and the deal that they have made to ensure that these programs can be funded.
At a press conference Tuesday afternoon, Oregon Governor Tina Kotek said online systems that state Medicaid departments use to receive federal funding stopped working, and Head Start was also impacted.
My ask of Washington, D.C. is turn on all those systems right now.
For those caught in the middle of it all, the demand doesn't go away. They'll keep serving and hope the community delivers support.
Let's bring in Kyle Eboshi now. Kyle, what's next?
So that federal judge in Washington, D.C. will issue a more permanent decision on Mondays. We'll have to wait and see what that really means.
So it seems like there's been a lot of confusion about this all day. What does it mean? Who's been affected? Will it be challenged? What's it been like for those nonprofits?
I think confusion is the right word, maybe uncertainty. Meals on Wheels is a prime example, right? They get about a third of their funding from the Fed. So that's a big piece of pie there. And if that goes away, that would be really challenging. You think of any business, really, if your revenue or the money coming in dries up literally overnight with no warning, you're in a tough spot planning for what's ahead and just keeping things going. And again, nonprofits, as you know, are not exactly flush with cash in many cases. And so it is a unique situation. In the case of Meals on Wheels, they may have to rely on donors, the community more. But again, they don't know. That's really the challenge here. They don't know what's ahead after this order.
So you talk about Meals on Wheels. What are other nonprofits saying?
Yeah, in my reporting today, I reached out to a number of nonprofits around the city of Portland, and there are a lot of them that do rely on federal grants. It was interesting because many of them didn't get back to me, didn't say anything, or said, hey, we don't want to comment on this, we don't want to touch it, which to me is very interesting. As a journalist, there's obviously something behind that. For one, maybe there is that confusion. They don't know what's ahead and don't want to comment on it. But it also could be they don't want to attract attention and have a target on their back or greater scrutiny on their operations.
Kyla Boshi, thanks so much. Well, coming up next on the story, one Oregon firefighter who spent 2 weeks in LA battling the deadly fires joins us live to tell us what it was like. Plus, an update on current containment efforts there as Southern California sees its first meaningful rain in months. Stick with us. Firefighters in Southern California were given some form of a break over the weekend from the dry and windy conditions that sparked several major deadly wildfires across the Los Angeles region. The first significant storm of the season brought snow and rain that helped to stop the flames, but also contributed to ash and mud flooding some streets. Last week, Los Angeles County officials quickened cleanup efforts and passed several measures intended to lessen the environmental impact of debris. Experts are warning that ash and debris in recent burn zones is a toxic mix of burned cars, electronics, batteries, paints, and other materials that could contain harmful chemicals. Now here's a look at the burn areas as they stand right now, according to Watch Duty. Firefighters have almost completely contained the three major fires. The Palisades fire showing 95% containment, the Hughes fire showing 98%, and the Eaton fire showing 99% containment. Now officials are shifting their focus to what caused them. And several crews from Oregon, including members of Portland Fire and Rescue, went to LA to help fight the fires. So we want to bring in live now one of those firefighters, Nick Borton. He's based out of Station 19 and has been part of Portland Fire and Rescue for almost 17 years. Nick, thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So first, welcome back. You returned from California this past weekend. So tell us, what was it like getting that call to go to LA?
Well, the initial call came in Tuesday night that they were just putting a list together because they weren't for sure if they were going to need resources down there right at first. And then come Wednesday morning was my normal shift day, and driving into work in the morning, we got activated. So we had a couple hours to muster our gear together and form up at training to get ready to start the drive down there. And get down there as soon as we could so that we could effectively help out.
Wow, so quick turnaround. When you got there, what was it like? Where did you and your team start?
So I was part of the strike teams that were assigned to the Palisades fire. And on our first shift, we were up in the Palisades neighborhood. And then we eventually got pushed down to the Mandeville Canyon area, where the fire was starting to work up the ridge and crest over the ridge side and go down to where all those homes are. So we posted up on houses all throughout the night, prepping houses, doing whatever we could. We had aerial support coming in, dropping water loads after water loads all throughout the night.
So I'm curious.
Yeah.
I'm curious, were there any particular challenges with these fires that you faced?
Just the terrain is the biggest part. You know, that area has a lot of box canyons, so that fire can jump across the canyon really easy. And so that intensifies the rate of spread. So getting a good handle on it early is essential to firefighting efforts.
Were there any lessons learned from this fire that you can take back here to Portland, say if we ever had a large urban wildfire?
You know, the biggest thing is just having houses prepped. You know, if you're living in a urban interface area, having, you know, vegetation cleared away from your houses so that if an instance like this does happen, you're able to fend off the fire somewhat so that it can't jump onto your property as soon as possible. And I tell you what, a lot of those houses down there had sprinkler systems on their roofs to help cool down their house and wet it down and prevent the fire from spreading.
So, you know, here in Oregon, many of us, we only saw photographs and videos. It was horrifying to watch. I can't even imagine being there as a first responder. But tell us, did you witness anything that you can't unsee that still sticks with you?
You know, I gotta say, I mean, it's one of those natural disasters where it just goes through, whether it's a hurricane, tornadoes, earthquakes. This one happened to be fire, and it took out entire neighborhoods. So seeing just blocks of houses where nothing is left standing is kind of hard to see. I mean, people lost their homes and all their possessions. So that's hard for them to have to come back home to. So I feel for them in that.
Can you give us any perspective on how long you think it'll take for that community to recover?
You know, I'm not for sure. You know, the cleanup's going to probably take quite a while, you know, to get all that rubble out of there and build new houses. I will say the utility companies were down there immediately. Even they were coming from out of state as well, bringing in resources, working on getting power poles back up and gas lines and everything so that they can start the rebuild process. So they're working tirelessly to start heading that way.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for your time and for all that you've done. We appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, earlier this month, reporter Bridget Chavez from our sister station in Seattle spent 3 days on the ground as the Palisades and Eaton fires raged in LA. They spoke to residents and first responders about the devastation.
It was a firestorm. It was a tornado, and there was like 30-foot flames. It was just a powder keg moving down, and I had so many embers flying around me. I couldn't see, I couldn't breathe.
Hear more of that story in Scenes of Destruction, 3 days in LA. You can stream it right now on KGW+. We'll be right back. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. The good stuff is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. A reminder, you can stream the story on your own schedule. Just download the free KGW Plus app, available now on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. I hope you all enjoy your Tuesday evening, and I'll see you right back here tomorrow night at 6:30.